The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim is upon us, and I have just seen it. So, how was it? Was it a woke girl boss fest, like the American trailer suggests, or a more evenly balanced adventure, like the Japanese trailer would have us believe? And, since it is another prequel, are there any connections to Amazon's The Rings of Power, and most importantly of all, was it any good? Keep watching, because without spoiling too much, all shall be revealed. Let's dive in. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Before we get into the review of the movie proper, a review where I will provide only the mildest of spoilers, more specifically the story setups you need in order to determine if this is a movie you want to spend your time seeing or not. Let's begin with establishing where I come from, where Tolkien is concerned. I tremendously enjoy The Lord of the Rings, but my point of reference is the Peter Jackson movies. I have never read the original books. I prefer the animated Rankin and Bass Hobbit movie to the overstuffed movie trilogy though, and I find Amazon's The Rings of Power to be utterly unwatchable. Not having read the original books though, I can't go into any deep lore or mythology here. For that, I would have to refer you to Gary from Nerdrotic. What I can do is go over how this compares to the other movies, and most importantly, address your concerns about wokeness and girl bossness, which is what most of you really want to know anyway. Indeed, that is why formerly loyal fans have walked out on the likes of Star Wars, Marvel, and DC in droves. And I've heard many suggest that is what will decide if they end up seeing this in theaters or on the high seas. Though obviously, neither we at Midnight's Edge nor any of our sponsors condone anyone taking to the high seas for anything. I mean, for one thing, it's wrong, and just think of all the spyware, malware, and other assorted tracking software you'd run the additional risk of being subjected to, even beyond your normal browsing. There's a fix though. To protect yourself, you need to protect your data, and a good way of doing that is through a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel's sponsor, Surfshark, which you can visit at surfshark.com/midnight. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which encrypts your online data and secures your personal information, even when you're on a free public Wi-Fi, which is a goldmine for anyone wanting your data. Surfshark masks your IP address so that your location, download history, and other data isn't linked to your personal ID, while their clean web feature blocks trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, enabling you to surf safely. Best of all, unlike some other VPN providers out there, Surfshark does not monitor, track, or store what you do online. There's no activity log. In addition to providing online safety, Surfshark also liberates your internet by unblocking blocked websites and enabling you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which gives some great advantages when it comes to streaming. For instance, you can access 15 different Netflix libraries, all with a different selection of movies and TV series simply by changing your virtual location. And there are many to choose from, as Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in more than 100 countries around the world. And it gets even better. If you use our link, surfshark.com/midnight, that triggers an exclusive special holiday offer of 4 extra months for free. So, secure your privacy with Surfshark. Just head on over to surfshark.com/midnight to order. Link is in the description. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out at surfshark.com/midnight. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's shift our focus back to The Lord of the Rings, beginning with just where War of the Rohirrim takes place in canon between Peter Jackson's original trilogy and Amazon's Rings of Power. Just like with Star Trek, there exists 2 different, legally separate Lord of the Rings universes. And unless Amazon is willing to pay a crap ton more than they already have flushed down the drain, never the two shall meet. First, there is the Peter Jackson verse, made by Warner and New Line, and it consists of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy. Warner and New Line have the rights to anyone and anything worth anything in Tolkien's canon. Then there is Amazon. They have the Rings of Power, which is basically their fan fiction based on the remaining scraps from the appendices that they were able to license from the Tolkien estate. And that is why there is so much fan fiction there. They don't have access to the actual stories. If they even want to reference someone proper, they have to pay Warner and New Line separately for the license to do that. As such, Amazon's Rings of Power exists in a separate continuity, and no matter how much Amazon marketing may try to deceive you into thinking otherwise, it is not a prequel to the Peter Jackson movies. Hell, they can't even use the same font as them. Yeah, it's not a creative choice that they don't do that, it's a legal one. Warner owns the usage of the font you associate with The Lord of the Rings, which is why it's completely off-limits to Amazon. However, Warner and New Line do not outright own the movie rights to Tolkien's characters and stories. Like Sony still does with Spider-Man, and Fox used to with the X-Men and Fantastic Four, Warner and New Line control the movie rights to the bulk of Tolkien's characters and stories in perpetuity, provided that they continue to use those rights. That means that those movie rights will revert unless a new theatrical movie with a minimum specified budget and a minimum specified theatrical release is released within a specified number of years after the previous release. We on the outside don't know the details of those contracts, but by all outwardly indications, that number is 10 years. Consider the first Hobbit movie was released in 2012, 9 years after The Return of the King, and The War of the Rohirrim is out now, exactly 10 years after the last Hobbit movie. If it hadn't been, then by all accounts, all rights would have reverted to the Tolkien estate in 2025. As such, like Fant4stic and even the direct-to-video Hellraiser movies from Dimension of the aughts, The War of the Rohirrim is a rights retainer, the contractual minimum Warner and New Line had to do to secure the continued hold on the Tolkien movie rights, which will enable them to continue making Lord of the Rings movies in the Peter Jackson verse, with The Hunt for Gollum, scheduled for a 2026 release, being the next. By extension, that means that even if it is a rights retainer and animated, The War of the Rohirrim is also an official canon part of the Peter Jackson verse. So, unlike The Rings of Power, The War of the Rohirrim is an actual prequel to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it has no connection to Amazon's Rings of Power. But is it any good? And is it woke? Let's get into that. This movie takes place 200 years prior to the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it deals with what is essentially a civil war in Rohan. A Game of Thrones, if you will, because the story is ultimately about different factions of men fighting for control and dominance over their land. In the opening prologue, we are introduced to Hera, daughter of Helm Hammerhand, the king of Rohan, and we are told that while she is left out of the history books, this is her story. I will admit that in the opening minutes, it felt as if she was set up as a girl boss who was written out of the history books because of the toxic masculinity of whoever wrote the historic record. I also noted that the ruling men appeared to be afflicted with severe cases of what activists might call toxic masculinity, as they were so eager to diminish the efforts of the Shield maidens of the years prior. But then, surprisingly, no more came of this, as the movie proper did not go in the direction that either the US trailer or the opening prologue would have you believe. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Hera is no more a girl boss than was Éowyn. She may be more alert to some things. Everyone adores her, especially her father. But she is not the bestest ever, and she has no innate Rey-like superpowers. Case in point, she does best one guy and a couple of background fodder, in the same way that Éowyn could. But the movie makes it clear that against an actual skilled, older and much more experienced warrior, she doesn't stand a chance. So, does the movie reframe canon to make her shine? Not as such, no. The movie does cover canonical events from her point of view, yes, but insofar as I can tell from looking over the abridged version of Tolkien's canon, no changes to it have been made. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. Anyway, the movie does tell her story, yet it tacitly explains why she doesn't have a bigger role in canon and the historical record, with that while momentous for her, her lives and times were, on the whole, completely inconsequential for the larger story and the history of Rohan. She was there, along for the ride, but the real hero of the story is her father, King Helm Hammerhand. And that guy is practically Conan the Barbarian. I mean, for those who mourn that we haven't gotten a King Conan movie, this is a pretty darn good approximation of one. So no, the movie is not woke in the girl boss sense. On the contrary, there is even messaging that runs counter to wokeness in all its forms. Whether by accident or design, there's actually a very wholesome, pro-family message in here as well. While it's canon that the lineage of Helm Hammerhand ended, his name and legacy will live forever because of his heroic actions. All he wanted for his daughter, the star of this movie, was for her to settle and marry a good husband. Ideally from Gondor nobility for political purposes, but still, his wish for her was for her to find a man who would protect her, and then all their legacies would live on through her children. But alas, and this may be the most girl boss thing about Hera, she needs no man. The movie doesn't specify why, but she doesn't. Instead, she lives her best life, which is destined to end up with cats as companions, and for that, she is completely forgotten. History, i.e. Tolkien canon, didn't even record her name. They had to make one up for the movie, and I liked the tacit explanation of why they had to. There was no conspiracy, no attempt at writing her out of history. No, all the later in-continuity historians had to go by was the common knowledge that Helm Hammerhand had a daughter. Beyond that, there was no one to remember her and fill in the details. She should have listened to her dad. The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, may be advertised as woke, but message-wise, this is one of the most based movies I have seen in a long, long time. Beyond the lack of girl-bossness, there is no DEI in here either. Unlike what passes for Middle-earth in the Rings of Power, this Middle-earth actually looks like Middle-earth. Not being into anime, I will admit that at times I was a little bit distracted by the animation, as the backgrounds looked like they were from a near photoreal AAA video game. While the traditional 2D animated characters sported facial features I associate with anime, but as the story got going, I was actually so engaged that I got over that. To me, The War of the Rohirrim was a very pleasant surprise, one I enjoyed more than I thought I would, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. Nothing can touch Peter Jackson's original trilogy, but I think I prefer The War of the Rohirrim to the Hobbit trilogy. So that's my verdict, and now that you've heard it, are you planning on seeing the movie? Let me know in the comments, and before you go, remember to secure your privacy with Surfshark VPN. Use our link surfshark.com/midnight to get an exclusive special offer of 4 extra months for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out at surfshark.com/midnight. Link is in the description.